Hello again, and welcome to another of my online content videos for my Music Humanities class. I'm Brad, and this is going to be the last one of these that we do about the Baroque era, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite guys, Johannes Sebastian Bach. Okay, lived from 1685 to 1750, almost exactly the same time that Georg Friedrich Handel was operating. In fact, they were born the same year. Bach. Now, we're talking about, rules of counterpoint. We're talking about, polyphony, dense polyphony, even though Handel's beginning to kind of like consolidate that into more of a homophonic approach. We're talking about new forms, inventing new forms and new things of music. And we're talking about this ability to do modulation, based on new tuning systems, getting rid of the old modal harmonies and replacing them with the equal tempered. Sometimes it was called the well tempered. That was actually a different system that Bach used, but very similar. And the guy, let's spell his name here. The guy who did all of these the best was Bach. He was just a monster composer. It was kind of like a Josquin level of output. I think he also composed close to 600 pieces in his life, but he was able to just internalize and embody all these things to produce just remarkable pieces of music. In fact, I'd say Bach is probably responsible for me being in music myself. In the fourth grade, my parents bought me a record that had music by Bach done on a new device called the synthesizer. And it was given to me for my birthday. And when I put it on, this is what I heard. I just thought that was the most glorious thing that I had ever heard. I think my little fourth grade brain said, "This is what you want to do when you grow up, Brad." It's just remarkable music. Somehow his music makes sense in a way that, say, Buildings by Frank Lloyd Wright makes sense, or any number of things. Paintings by Picasso makes sense. It's just incredible stuff. Well, let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we're just going to play some pieces. I'll be doing a lot more with Bach in the class session itself. We're going to take a really close look at one of his pieces and talk about what it is that gives it its particular character. He was born in Eisenach, Germany, and let me get this up here. So he kind of grew up around here, and he was actually born into a musical family, and his brothers were both gifted musicians. His sons were both also well-known composers, and he spent some time kind of as a journeyman musician running around, and he wound up getting a good job in Leipzig, and he became the cantor of the Thomasschule at the Thomaskirche in Leipzig, which was basically a teaching job, and he started kind of branching out from there, and pretty soon he was also director of music in two different churches in town, the larger churches, Nikolai Kirche and the Paulina Kirche, which was the church of the university. So he pretty much had the entirety of Leipzig wrapped up. But it also meant that he had to compose an enormous amount of music and oversee a huge stable of musicians, because he was expected to come up with new pieces for the Mass, almost every Sunday. And he did. He could just spew this stuff out. Now, interestingly, Bach was not known as a composer back then. In fact, he was not very famous at all back then. So here he is, we're in the middle of the Baroque, towards the end of the Baroque. Handel, like I said, was enormously successful. Went to England, had a great time, really, really famous. Bach was just kind of like, they heard about this guy that played the organ, who was good at playing the organ, because his music wasn't contemporary. he was in fact doing that old polyphony stuff when Handel was looking at something new, and people just didn't like his music back then. In fact, he was kind of like unknown until Mendelssohn, a composer in the 19th century, rediscovered his works and said, "Hey, this is really great stuff." So yeah, and he tried to get jobs outside Leipzig. He kept trying to better himself a little bit, and never quite succeeded. But it gave him a chance to do a huge amount of composing. So let me play you some of his stuff. Again, you're going to recognize these pieces. This is an example of what Bach can do. So like that chord that he played just before it resolved in the cadence, that was a really dissonant chord. But Bach was able to use the rules of counterpoint and his sense of how music went, his sense of the psychology of music, to produce just a remarkable thing. And it continues from there. So that's called the toccata and fugue in D minor. The toccata was kind of a free-form way of expression. Bach probably improvised that, The fugue, we're going to be talking about a fugue in class. It's much more highly structured. I'll just play a little bit of the fugue part of this so that you can kind of hear what it does. Okay. So it's imitative polyphony, but not imitated in any kind of direct and facile way. This is just incredible stuff. It's funny because when you hear this piece, you probably think, well, this is the music they always play behind the evil mastermind in movies. It's because you can hear it working itself out. You can hear the logic of it. It might be really twisted logic, but it's still this logic and it's making sense. And this music is just unfolding and, you're just carried along for the ride. Yeah. And obviously Bach was a monster organ player. That part of his reputation was true. He definitely knew how to get his fingers around the keys. Here's another example of an organ work. Also, you can hear in these works, that he's making full use of this new tuning system. He's able to, bring in all kinds of harmonies and modulate to different keys. This is one that's a bit more traditional in a sense. It's like the canon or the chaconne that I played earlier. This is his Passacaglia and fugue in C minor. And a Passacaglia is just a sequence of chords that repeats over and over again. And I'm going to play you this. So it's got that heavy Baroque thing going where it just feels like the wheels of justice are grinding away, or there's just like this fate that you can't escape because it's got that drive. Even though this is a very measured drive, it's still there and it's still part of this music. And after a while, it just really builds up and you're starting to get stuff like this. Yeah, like I said, that's definitely the evil mastermind. And you get down to something like this. Which is the calm before the storm, where all of a sudden, everything kind of breaks out. He really takes you for a ride. This piece, like the first piece I played, that I got in fourth grade, I have kind of a personal relationship to this piece, and actually to some of the others I'm going to play. I'll be talking about that in class because, that's a powerful part of music. Is what does this music mean to you? What does it mean to me? Let me just play a few more. I'm going to skip a few here because we're going to be playing them in class quite extensively. This is one of his cello suites. He wrote pieces for solo instruments sometimes. And this is for, again, he was fascinated by technology. This is a new instrument, the cello. It's adapted from an old Renaissance viol, but it's much more negotiable, and you can just do astounding things. And some people claim this is some of the most divine music that they've encountered. Yeah, this piece is interesting because it's, heavy psychology. In a way, it's a monophonic piece. It's only one note at a time. There's no chords, there's no polyphony, but Bach creates the impression of polyphony by the way he's constructed this music. You have low notes and high notes, and they kind of segregate into different musical streams. A lot of music psychologists have studied this phenomenon. How do we parse incoming sound? He was just doing some things that were just amazing. And then, of course, there's the Brandenburg concertos, okay? And so you can hear that he's got, at his command, at his disposal, he's got a pretty good stable of musicians because he was able to write for a very substantial orchestra. These pieces, these Brandenburg concertos, are just stunning. I'm sorry I'm being so superlative about Bach, but this really is music that matters a lot to me, and I'm hoping to communicate some of that to you. They're just amazing. And here's the story about them. He wrote 6 of these. Okay, each one, the concerto had kind of solidified into a form that had like 3 different parts instead of the 4 in Vivaldi's Four Seasons. There was a fast first part, then there was a slow kind of little middle section, then there was generally a fast third part. I just played the first part of his 4th concerto, and I'm going to play the third part of that in just a second. But he wrote these to try to get a job. There was a job opening at the court of the Duke of Brandenburg, and it was paying quite a bit more than he earned in Leipzig. It would have been, a bit more freedom, a bit more, prestige. And he sent them to the Duke, saying, hey, this is an example of what I could do. And I'm just going to play a little bit of this, the third movement from this Brandenburg Concerto number 3, okay? Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a harpsichord in there. It's like, classic Baroque music. It's got this basso continuo and everything like this, but it's just an incredible piece of music. So, like I said, he sent these to the Duke of Brandenburg. It's not clear the Duke ever even opened them up. In fact, these were the pieces that Mendelssohn discovered. They were in the top drawer of some desk. And he looked at it and said, "This is just amazing music." And in fact, it is. Okay, I'm just going to play two more. This is a piece of music. I'm going to play it for you and probably talk about it in class a little bit. But this just shows you Bach can be very introspective at times. It's not clear what drove him sometimes as a composer. But it's funny because this is actually from a series of pieces that he wrote. The WTC that you see there stands for Well-Tempered Clavier. And it was pieces that he did to demonstrate the new, again, I called it software, the new tuning system and the capabilities it had. He wrote 24 pieces in this particular book. He wrote actually two of these, one in all 12 major keys and one in all 12 minor keys to show what was possible. And this is his first well-tempered clavier piece. Yeah, I hate to fade it down. Go to the website. I've got the whole thing there. This is just sublime music. It's almost hard to listen to for me because, it's just really emotional. Anyhow, this is the last piece. I'm going to play a bit of this in class too, but this is his final piece that he wrote. It's called Die Kunst der Fuge, or the art of the fugue. And again, we'll be talking about what a fugue is. It was a form that Bach mastered. He pretty much invented it in a way. But this was his final work, and he was trying to show everything possible with the fugue. And I'll just play you a little bit of it. Yeah. So you can kind of hear there's a type of imitative polyphony happening, but it's really dense. It's really intriguing. It's not obvious how he's doing it. And again, later on in this piece, you're hearing. Yeah. So there's like a clarity and a coherence that's unmatched almost in any other music I can think of. Anyhow, like I said, we're going to be talking about Bach in class, and I'll end this one here.